Hope we're enjoying everything so far. I'm really looking forward to this session. Something we touched on in the opening panel around kind of the importance of data to kind of drive your AI journey. So without further ado, I will welcome to the stage Mark, who's our CEO of Configur. I will allow him to give a better intro of himself. But Mark, welcome to the stage and over to you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Marco Oliver, the CEO of Configur. Today's presentation is going to be about tangible outcomes for AI. How do you achieve them? How are we seeing them be achieved? And primarily, it's down to one thing, and that's data. The data strategies that you have all been implementing over the several years that I'm sure you've been working on them are going to massively lead into your AI strategy. It's imperative that data is leveraged in the AI solutions to maximize the outcomes. And I'll go through a number of examples today to highlight why that is, and also some thoughts and different ideas around maybe some of the approaches that we're seeing being taken by businesses that are working and those that aren't. A little bit about myself, my background. I've been in data for 18 years. I started working with AI and chatbots around 8 years ago. So I was working with them before they got sexy when ChatGPT came around and everybody jumped on the bandwagon. But for me, there's been some massive changes throughout that period. When we were looking at AI back then, it was things like utterances and sentiment, and it was very top-level things. And now what we're seeing with agentic and RAG systems is the advancements that are happening there and how that's evolving. And that's what we're going to look at. So there is an AI paradox. And this is the thing that always gets people a little bit, well, sometimes excited and then sometimes very apprehensive about it. SMEs are generating 3.7 times return on their investment. That's a key number when you compare that to enterprises, who, when MIT led a project, identified that they're getting 95% of pilots are bringing back no ROI, no tangible outcomes. And what we need to do is to start leveraging and thinking of the business functions, not just the global strategy, but how do we actually treat every individual team as an SME to enable AI and to leverage their data. We spent a lot of time working at strategic level to bring that data together to get outcomes at the end, where we're looking at whether that's dashboarding, insights, everything else. But when you actually go down to the ground level of the operational teams, how do they actually get outcomes? Because there's a lot of downstream process that is still resulting in poor quality data. So the data-driven illusion, this is one of the key things. It's all about how do we measure it. So this is a very poignant stat. 60% of models are now trained on synthetic data. So they're being trained on data that was generated from models themselves previously. When you look at that and you start trying to leverage that data, how confident are you in the quality of it? Which is why it's so important to have your data at the heart of those models, working alongside what they're there for, which is the LLM capability. Data silos are still estimated to cost 7.8 million annually to businesses, and that could be cost of time, it could be cost of missed opportunity. It's a key stat, and we need to look at how do we bring those silos down, and how do we actually connect data at a ground level to enable AI. Poor data quality, still the biggest challenge. Everyone that we speak to, and I'm sure many of you who sat in this room are looking at the data quality issues in the business. How do we improve them? How do we improve collection? There are massive opportunities with AI to actually improve that data quality on the way in, and not just worry about it after it's already been collected. And we can explore some of that shortly. So what is needed to focus on? How many of you are starting to do more with RAG, agentic? Hands up if you're using them at the moment. Okay, not too many. Okay, interesting. They are becoming the new normal. Nearly every single business we work with now has some kind of agentic process that we implement for them. It's becoming a key driver. There are massive efficiencies there. And I know what many of you are going to say, well, what about the security aspects? What about the security elements? And that is another key point. We do need to make sure that we're doing this with a problem-led approach. Because if it's done at a strategic level for no reason, many of us are sat in meetings with directors, CEOs of companies, and they say, we need AI, it's part of our strategy. Why do you need AI? Because we need it. Our competitors are doing it. It's where the landscape's changing. We need to look at what the problem is and how we can solve it, and sometimes that's going to be an AI solution. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just improvement in data process. And that's one of the key things that is now leading to this visibility of transparency, accountability, ethical AI. How do we start understanding how we can incorporate this into the business without the pushback, the challenge from the team as to what's going to happen with their role? What's it going to mean for me? Am I going to be automated out of this process? There's so much that we need to consider. And I always say, when we had the Industrial Revolution, nobody cared that machines were going to replace people's jobs. But now we're going after high-skill jobs, solicitors, lawyers. There is a definite shift to, well, hang on, let's not rush into this. Let's try and monitor why we might need this. And I think it's a good thing, but it's also something that we need to think, right, okay, but why would we just create vacuums of staff requirements in the business by automating all of the graduate level jobs and not give them any outcomes? Where do we push it? So there's some of the things we're looking at. Now, in terms of delivering the best solutions, this is how the 5 steps that we're working with businesses to implement. Start with the data, clear policies, ensure that there's an ethical bedrock for why the data is being used. How do we do that? That needs to happen at ground level in the operational teams. How can we connect their data within that team before it moves upstream to our ETL processes, our ELT processes? If we can get that right, then the rest of this is going to get a lot easier. We just touched on it, but review the process. Why does it need AI? What is the benefit? What's the outcome that we're trying to achieve? Target high impact, low risk processes. That's the ones that are going to give the most value and the best outcomes. On the people side, we have the training. Everybody is chomping at the bit to leverage AI in their day-to-day roles. They're all trying to jump on ChatGPT. We know there's high risk with that. If you've got a Copilot in the business, we were talking about a few examples last night where people can start asking questions of it. We had a client that we didn't implement their Copilot. They did that themselves. And somebody asked the question of, what is my salary in comparison to other members of my team? And it gave them the answer. Massive, massive implications if you can ask those kinds of questions and your data governance isn't in the right place. And that is one of the things that I think we're struggling with. We're giving more access to information, but we're not quite getting the data governance right. And that comes down then to security. If you start looking at what can happen through AI, we're seeing data poisoning, prompt injections. They're the kinds of things that I'm sure DXC and many of the other companies here today are going to be talking to you primarily about. It's a key thing to be looking at. It's very easy to kind of implement those solutions. And just as quickly as we call them, the black hat hackers are trying to push that. On the DXC side and the white hat, they are trying to combat that, but it's a constant battle. It's a constant moving measure. So on the measure side, the key thing here is, how do you actually measure the outcomes? And that needs to be addressed not just as an endpoint, but as a starting point as well. What is the actual outcome I'm looking to get? And when I get there, how do I know it's a success? What is the ROI? What is the tangible outcome that I'm trying to achieve? Those 5 things together are going to drive the best outcomes. What we are seeing, and there's 4 case studies here that are quite interesting, building confidence in generated outputs. PubMed, they had a 39.7% increase in their own personalized model driven by their own data when comparing it to a standard LLM. That was all done around medical research, and their accuracy levels were actually up to 95% in terms of response rates on medical outcomes, which was very, very high. Maintaining the competitive advantage. One of the things that we always talk about as well is that if we can automate a process with AI and say this is AI driven, how do you maintain your actual USP as a business, your intellectual property, your intelligence? If I can generate something with AI, why do I need you as a business? So it's about using your data, your expertise, your knowledge to build that model and build that output that's going to give somebody confidence that, yes, you are leveraging AI, and yes, it is making things easier and simpler, but we don't lose any of that human USP that we have. Saving time and driving operational efficiencies. So Maiden saw 67% reduction in ticket maintenance effort, and we see very similar results when you look at, I'll come on to an example later on, but working with Network Rail, they had issues with route crime, where travel was happening across the tracks, and people were misclassifying information. People don't like saying things like suicide when they're writing tickets or notes. It gets misclassified. It was taking them 14 days per operations center for 2 staff to sit there and manually re-correct tickets. When we put in the AI process, we massively reduced that down to 4 days within 3 months. It's a massive, massive step forward. And again, it was a very focused core use rather than this strategic view. And then you can grow it from there and roll it out from there. Access-rich insights. How do we actually improve the data literacy challenges in the business? There's so many, if you look at Power BI and the tools and Tableau that are being used around the business, it helps 10 to 15% of the staff who then get bottlenecked when they get asked to change the dashboards. Can I have insight into this, please? Why can't we enable the rest of the business? We all use data every day. Everybody is now a data analyst. How do we enable them? AI has really high-tuned accuracy. I'll come on to some good examples afterwards, but having a conversational interaction with your data is the way that it's going to become commonplace, and it's the way that people are going to interact moving forward. So case study. I actually picked us as a case study for this. I've got investors that are constantly breathing down my neck about us wanting to do more sales, scaling. We need 150% growth year on year. It's a very fast-moving area. My sales team weren't performing well enough. They lacked consistency. There was disparity in the team. The conversion rates didn't make sense. We couldn't work out why we couldn't just pump out this big system. So what we did is we actually started looking at leveraging agentic. So I have this on here, which is my AI pin. Claude records the meetings, records the sessions, created an agentic AI process. And what that process did is we trained it on what good looked like for a sales meeting. That what good looked like would then translate the conversation. It would extract all the key points. It would update our CRM. It updates the team in the Slack channel for the sales team. It tells them what the meeting was about, high-level view. And then it also gave them that rating. It told them out of 5 stars how good that conversation was and what they missed. That gave us really good insight into the team. We noticed that on average, the ones with the lowest conversion rates were getting 1 to 2 star ratings. They weren't mentioning key outcomes. They weren't mentioning key outputs. And we then brought in Sophie, who is a speaking coach, and also we brought the human element in, the training side, but we knew what the problem was, we knew how to address it, and that's what gave us the outcome. So that led to a change in sales approach, 120% growth of total contract value, and it saved us 6.5 hours a week in just the processing side of sales, which meant that they had more time to be human. And I'm a massive advocate for AI is fantastic, it's going to be automation, but actually there's a real benefit to AI, and that is it's making us more human, all of us. Because if I can have a conversation with somebody and I'm capturing all the notes, I don't need to be sitting there writing them down. I can actually engage with you and speak to you at a personal level and actually take in what you're saying and evolve. So that for us was a really pivotal point. It made us realize that, and I think many of us do this, we're very good at telling others what they need to do better, but sometimes if you take a bit of self-reflection, it can really highlight what you're not doing so well. So what not to do? I've spoken about Air Canada previously, so if any of you heard me speak about it, 2024, they put their chatbot online. They didn't have safeguards. They hadn't really trained the knowledge base properly. Somebody asked about a flight that they were going on to travel for a grievance, and they said they needed to change it because somebody in the family had died. The chatbot said, "Don't worry, we have a grievance policy, and we will refund your ticket. Just message us afterwards." He messaged them afterwards, and the contact center said, "No, we don't do that. That's not our policy." It went to court, obviously very bad reputationally for Air Canada, but they tried to argue that the chatbot was a separate entity to the business. They didn't fly. Luckily at the time, for them, they only got fined $4,000. And that was because there was a refund of the ticket and a little bit of compensation. With the EU AI Act now that's come into play, misuse of information like that would actually result in very serious fines. It can be up to 7% of annual turnover, depending on what they judge. Taco Bell happened 2 weeks ago. I don't know if anybody see this in the media. They did an AI drive-through, so you could drive up, nobody's there waiting, but assistant comes on and says, "What can I get you?" Somebody got stuck in an infinite loop of, "What would you like to drink with that?" So he said, well, I would like a Mountain Dew. Yeah, okay, thank you. What would you like to drink with that? So he posted that on TikTok, had 29 million views within 2 days. Their reputation wasn't very good. What it also did is it let somebody order 15,000 bottles of water because they didn't have the safeguards in place. So it was a disaster, it was pulled, and again, it wasn't a thought-through process. However, a good example of when it is done well, Vodafone Germany, they had a massive issue with incoming messages. Contact center was getting overloaded. They had to have 24/7 support. They needed multilingual capabilities, and they weren't able to get the staff that could support that fully. They brought in various different aspects to their chatbot, which are actually really good examples. So number one, VIP tiering. If you message them as a business customer and they were able to classify who you were from your initial message, they actually passed you through directly to somebody if you were premium, what they classed as premium. If you weren't, then you went into the normal process. The second thing that they did was the agent handoff. They used, obviously, sentiment analysis, like many of us do, to detect when somebody was becoming a bit frustrated with the bot. They also then did conversational degeneration. They looked at when people were saying the same thing in different ways more than 3 times. If it gets there more than 3 times, that's something then that we act on and we put a human into the loop. So again, it's about, okay, AI is going to give us efficiencies, but how do we maintain the customer service? What that resulted in, they had I've got the stats here actually, 40% of their customer service calls were handled entirely by voice assistant, 20% reduction in their average handling call times. They increased CSAT scores, and they also had cost savings by their tier 1 support that exceeded millions of pounds. It's a massive, massive win. Is Coca-Cola in here? Oh, hello. This for me is really good use of AI marketing. It's one of the top use cases. The challenge that I'm sure I don't need to tell you. I might get you up to come and talk about it. But the challenge that Coca-Cola have is how do we actually capture who our audience is? How do we understand who we're targeting? Who do we market to? And how do we also then leverage AI to do market research when we don't really know our customer base very freely? Number one, freestyle fountains, the ability for people to be able to choose their own flavors. It was a really good use case that actually led into the market research and led to the new Sprite flavors that got generated. People were doing the mix matching of the different flavors on the fly. It was mixing them there, and then that market research went into the production. The personalized marketing for FIFA World Cup tickets, by having campaigns like that, and you're getting people to register on an app, it's actually bringing that information in. You can then remarket and target. The image recognition for bottle caps, so not just OCR, but that was AI recognition on the bottle caps. You didn't have to scan that in anymore, and every time that you did that, that was able to then collect data on your audience. And finally, the sentiment and keyword analysis across social media. When people mention Coca-Cola, when they're talking about it positively, when they talk about it negatively, and matching that against the campaigns, it's a very, very good use case of how marketing, leveraging AI, can be done effectively. And I'm glad you're here, so that's great. When it comes to case studies for data insights, I'm not here to pitch you, but for us, one of the key things for us is about data literacy. It's about enabling use of data across everybody in the team. We think we do it very well, and we do that with summaries on graphs based on job roles, job descriptions, automatically looking at the data, and if you're somebody that's in sales, you get a very different message as someone who's a director of the business. We need to be tailoring the summaries to that level. Conversationally chatting with your data, dynamic, automatic generation of dashboards and graphs. You can have it on the go on your phone. It's the kind of thing when we're sat in a board meeting, how many of us have been there when somebody says, well, what's the number for that? And you haven't got it on your dashboard. Being able to ask that data a question and get the answer there and then, it's very, very effective. And then also, one of the biggest parts of unlocking that data literacy problem is the ability for people to have recommendations of what it is they should be looking for in the data. It's something that people don't always know. They know at a very high surface level what their manager might want to see, but what do they need to know to get data-driven outcomes for them personally in their role? It's a really important one. I touched on the Network Rail example already. Welsh Government, we do the Supply Chain Manufacturing Action Plan. The Welsh Government had a big problem. We do lots of offshore projects, offshore wind, EV, retrofit programs, But how do they keep the business in Wales? It's a very difficult thing to do. If you look at offshore wind, Germany, they're all big players that actually come in. So they wanted to look at a way of how do we build consortiums of Welsh businesses that can support large-scale projects. So by leveraging the data, having information about businesses, and not just revenue, profitability, number of staff, but actually looking across their websites, pulling information in from office moves, hires, fires, actual keyword detail around their business, you can actually build a web of businesses that can work together collectively. And Interlink is a really key one. They work with blue chip clients, providing lead generation, AI automation emails. We've all had them. You all sit there and you get an email through and you just think, that's just AI. It's terrible. What we try to do with them, it's about actually understanding the business and the person. So we bring information from LinkedIn, bring information about the business, whether a similar scenario, office moves, awards, and really tailor that message. We can't all be superhuman when we're first doing our campaigns. If you've got multi-mass lead generation going out, it's very difficult for people to do that individually. As many people would say you should, but it's impossible. Whereas if you can make it personal, you get the interaction, you get people feeding back, and then you can build the relationship. So we're at the point where this is just a key message. The mass adoption of AI is an opportunity to shift our mindsets beyond the structured world. And I think many of us are still there where we very much think of our structured data as an enabler for AI. But what is the possibility that we have by leveraging the dark data or previously dark data that existed in the business? If we can find the answer to that question, then we'll all be hopefully having some fantastic outcomes by the end of it. Thank you very much.